You know, when Ed called me in to ask me to join the show cabinet, he sort of, I was taken aback. He said, I want you to be campaign coordinator, I'd like you to join the shadow cabinet. I'd like you to be the deputy chair, secretary of the party. And I said, Ed, was it because of my forensic examination of Rupert Murdoch? And he said, no, I just need someone who's more unpopular with the Sun than me. And anyway, so I've passed that test already, I think. But I did say yes to this campaign job. And I said yes because I think there's a lot we've got to do. And I did have a prepared speech for you today. But after last night's award ceremony, and after some of the meetings I've had today, particularly with our colleagues in the unions and our council leaders, I'm going to change it a little bit. Because, you know, it was very moving last night. I gave out 3 awards. I gave one out to Joe, who was in his first year as a leader of the Labour group. Needs to get 2 wins in Carlisle, if I can remember that right, to take control next year, 6 target seats. And then there was John, who fought 5 general elections and 8 local elections as a councillor. And then there was Craig, who hasn't fought any elections yet, but probably will do, judging by the number of pints of beer he's scammed off every Parliament. Very enterprising. But what brings them together? What brings all of us together? It's that desire to make a difference, to make the world a better place when we're on it. And there was a great General Secretary. We heard from Ian this morning. I think he's going to be one of Labour's great General Secretaries. He comes from the trade unions, he's been a party organiser, he understands what has to be done. But there's a quote from Ron Hayward, who represented us as General Secretary in difficult times in the 70s, where he gave advice to a young MP, and he said, never forget from whence you came and who you seek to represent. And that's what we have to do. After 13 years in government, 18 months in opposition, we need to remind ourselves of that. And there's always an expression of that from a very great man that you will know. It's a close personal friend of mine, Fraser Kemp, the old MP. And Fraser, every week, would come down to Westminster and he was doing his nut about the Ride Home pigeon crease. He loved those creeds, and he loved the miners that did those allotments, and it meant something to him to protect those miners' interests. Those men had spent a third of their lives underground, and another third tending that land, and a developer was trying to take it off of them. And he put in hundreds of hours that he didn't have to do to try and look after their interests. And he did that because he wanted to make a difference, and he was Labour. And the way he did it was persuading a Labour minister to make those creeds a listed building, which also proves what a genius he was. And they're still there today. But the developers are still there as well, and they're going to come back. And his successor, whoever it is, I understand there's a bit of a tussle over where the borders go. Whoever is going to inherit those creeds, Fraser Kemp wants those miners looking after, and I know that Labour will do it. And it's sometimes, when we've been through difficult times, we do have to remind ourselves why we're here. We are the Labour Party. We represent the interests of working people. And the Tories don't do that. We know now that they're out of touch. It's not a problem for them being out of touch per se. It's a problem for them being out of touch because it means they make the wrong decisions that are harming families already after 18 months. And on any metric of success, this government is failing. The NHS is in crisis. Their welfare to work policy has collapsed around them. They're in internal strife over Europe and other major policy issues. And people say to me, Well, why not Labour not 10 points ahead in the polls? Because of this. But other than the fact that Rupert Murdoch owns 40% of the British media, and so whatever you read in the papers you can't believe these days. But part of the reason is we have to be honest with ourselves about what people think about us as well. And they thought, frankly, that we were in an arid desert of pragmatism for too long, and that we'd lost faith and trust in the people that Fraser Kemp stood up for. And we've got to put in a lot of work in the next 3 years to rebuild that trust. But let's remember what the Tories did in the 1980s as well. You know, when I was talking to our young Labour members, it's fantastic to see so many young members coming back to the party. That's about Ed Miliband, by the way, bringing them back. I remember being a young socialist when it wasn't unusual for my generation, the people who remember the 1981 budget, that generation of young people had unemployment lasting 5 years, an entire generation of people without work. I remember the local safari park advertising a job for a trainee sea lion trainer for £1 an hour plus all the fish you could eat. That's what they did. We joke about it, we put it on leaflets, but that's what they did. And so our task is going to be great, because we've got to rebuild trust with ourselves and with the electors. And that's why, for me, the phone hacking scandal is actually relevant to us in the Labour Party as well. If I'm being honest with you, there were relationships that fell apart between our senior people because they thought they'd betrayed trust. And actually what we know is they'd had their phones hacked by people. And that's how those stories ended up in the papers. Poor old Tessa Jan, she wouldn't say this to you, she's too proud. She had her life turned apart by Rupert Murdoch's phone hackers for many, many years. That's why it's important to us. But we've got to rebuild trust amongst ourselves, haven't we? The different wings of the party. And it was great to see that process coming together again in some of the meetings I've had today. Because we're going to go through the mill in the next 3 years with the people that we're here to represent. Only 12% of the Tory cuts have yet been applied. There's a lot more to come before we get the chance to put our alternative message to the British people. But we've come a long way in 18 months as well. We've got a new leader. We've been through the refounding Labour process that has allowed us to put in a policy framework that I think will get us that manifesto we need for the next general election. And now we're in the middle phase of Parliament. We need to characterise our opponents. They're very good at characterising themselves. We know they're out of touch. We know they're making the wrong decisions. And we've got to convince people that we are with them. And so the slogan for the local elections is going to be with you in tough times. And I would like you, if you can, in your own campaign areas, to take that with you message wherever you can, on leaflets and in the doorsteps. And I'm going to end this talk, because I do want to hear from you. I want us to ask questions. I'm just going to tell you how proud I am of Ed Miliband. Because I don't think it's fully recognised that on this hacking scandal, which is obviously personal to me, it wouldn't have cracked open had he not gone to Prime Minister's question time and told David Cameron that Rebecca Brooks should resign and that he should shelve the B Sky B bid by News International. It was a momentous moment. He probably made the biggest call of this political call of this Parliament when he did that. He took on the might the biggest media mogul on the planet. And frankly, that had not been done for nearly a quarter of a century. The last person to do that was Neil Kinnock. And he did that because he thought it was the right thing to do. And I want a leader that makes those kind of decisions for those miners in Rhino, regardless of power and position. He's a very great man. He deserves our support. He's going to be a great Prime Minister if we all come together. Thank you.